This is Out of Bounds. If it's happening in the world of golf, we're talking about it. Coverage, debate, discussion, pro golf and local golf. Let's do it. This is Out of Bounds. And here are your hosts, Nate Sharman and Josh Durso.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Out of Bounds podcast. I'm Josh Durso. That's Nate Sharman. It is Wednesday, June 24th, and we are getting you ready for the Travelers. We are just past the U.S. Open at Shinnecock. What an absolutely incredible weekend. Wyndham Clark is your U.S. Open winner. Nate, big weekend for Clark, who now looks like one of the best players on tour.
Yeah, definitely. And he gets his second U.S. Open victory, wins in wire-to-wire fashion. Started leading early or about 7 o'clock on Thursday and then never looked back. He walked in with a 6-shot lead on Sunday, ended up winning by 1, so it made it a little hairy towards the end. But he found a way to two-putt on that 18th hole and come away with his second U.S. Open trophy, won LACC. He has now won in Shinnecock. Quietly putting together quite the resume, Wyndham Clark is.
Yeah, a lot of time between those two wins, or it felt like a lot of time, at least in the iteration of the PGA Tour that we have now. The fans were the big story coming out of this U.S. Open, particularly with how they treated Wyndham over the weekend. Things really got heated on Sunday. The place was basically rooting against him. Now, there's been a lot of comments. I think it was Eamon Lynch who said yesterday that he doesn't think Long Island should host events anymore moving forward. The fans have essentially ruined professional golf there. I feel like that's a bit extreme.
Yeah.
But obviously the treatment of Wyndham Clark was getting plenty of talk. What'd you observe? What do you think? And is this something that the tour or, week to week event organizers need to deal with, or are we just going to let this go?
Yeah, I think they're just going to end up letting it go at the end of the day, but it's definitely weird to watching this tournament and seeing an American in Wyndham Clark getting shit on an American soil in the U.S. Open. I mean, we're used to foreigners getting crap from the fans like Matthew Fitzpatrick. We saw that the players, right? When Cameron Young made that big shot, they're all chanting USA and giving Matthew Fitzpatrick crap for it. But at a U.S. Open, for an American to get that kind of jeering from the crowd is kind of crazy. But Wyndham Clark really, like I think he said it well after the round, where he hasn't done a lot of things to win fans over, and he hopes that changes. But yeah, between beating up that locker at Oakmont last year and throwing that club at Quail Hollow last year, he hasn't done himself any favors to get those fans. He does kind of he comes off a little bit smug and a little bit arrogant at times, but for the most part, he really isn't that bad. And I said it on TikTok, and I'll say it here, and I said it in that video. I don't think it's really that big of a deal that he beat up that locker at Oakmont last year. I really don't. I think that happens a lot in professional sports, and a lot of times I think it doesn't get to the press. I think a lot of times they handle these problems internally, where they say, well, they find you in the background and they talk about how big of a disgrace this is, and the media never hears about it, and nobody ever even knows about it. You're trying to tell me that whether it be golf or whether it be football or whether it be basketball, players aren't getting overly competitive and beating up lockers? That's just asinine to even think about that. That's not happening. So I really think this is the locker story, and you could talk about the other stuff, but the locker story is a little bit of a non-story to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think the whole thing was really clearly blown out of proportion. Yes, it was. I felt like it was a big deal when it happened. And I feel like it ran its course. And the last I had heard, the folks at Oakmont were like, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It's been dealt with. Everything is fine. All good. And
Josh, they didn't even really fix it for a while. They were showing people like, this is the locker that Wyndham Clark damaged. They were almost parading it around a little bit and showing it off. So I don't think it's that big of a deal. I really don't.
Yeah. And to me, I feel like it was just one of those things that fans latched onto over the weekend because he wasn't the fan favorite. Although it is kind of strange. Yeah. Like, does this say something about the way that fans like or appreciate Scottie Scheffler compared to?
Definitely.
Because like if we're looking for a name in professional sport that carries themselves better, or in professional golf that carries themselves better than a Wyndham Clark, I mean, is that it? It's not Rory, obviously. People, the golf fans, Rory was getting chirped over the weekend too. He had one of
Yeah.
the better comebacks as well to one of those folks. You can find it on X.com, the Everything app. But point being, I just don't really get it.
Well, yeah, Rory's not American. I think that's always going to be hard to win over fans, especially in Long Island. But I think, Scottie Scheffler just lined up perfectly for him, looking for the career Grand Slam on his 30th birthday on Father's Day on Sunday. So I see, Wyndham Clark playing with Scottie Scheffler in that final group. Fans are always going to be kind of rooting for Scottie Scheffler in that situation. But I think it's a little crazy that they were almost, being against Wyndham Clark. I think it was on number 6. He hit his ball up by the green and they were cheering for it to go in the bunker. And that happened in multiple instances, right? But I think it's interesting to look at a guy like Wyndham Clark, not the most model person in the world, but still at the end of the day, I think is someone you can root for. And a guy that, you can say he got the easier draw on Thursday, the wind died down for him, but there was a million other people that could have taken that opportunity and ran with it. And Wyndham Clark was able to take some of those easier conditions on Thursday and parlay that into another U.S. Open victory. It's extremely impressive, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think again, if we're zooming out from just the way fans were acting there in looking as well at how they're acting on social media overall, zoom out to the last few seasons. When it comes to Scottie Scheffler, all I've heard or all I've seen is that he's boring, that he's uninteresting. There's no like real interest or rooting interest there. I'm not sure who if he's boring and Wyndham Clark is annoying or standoffish or, doesn't seem approachable or what have you. I don't know what golf fans are latching onto. Like, I don't know who the fan favorite is. And this whole weekend was just it painted a really odd picture of what professional golf looks like right now. Another thing with Wyndham, and something that I saw on social, approximately 9 billion videos of Wyndham allegedly cheating. All of these examples of him like taking aggressive practice swings or the ball, like things moving around the ball or whatever. Some stuff that was him moving loose impediments was one of the videos that I saw, which was completely legal, but people saying like he's pulling grass out. I don't think I've seen as many allegation videos in one tournament as I did with Wyndham this weekend. Do you think
Yeah.
that's just part of the whole deal of people just not being able to stand him and this is what we get?
Yeah, I think so. And that's just people grasping on the straws, right? And trying to will Sky to a victory. I think that was a huge part of it too, with Scottie Scheffler playing in that final group, looking for the career Grand Slam. Scottie just, unfortunately for him, had it in neutral all day on Sunday and wasn't able to come out with really anything. Played
Yeah.
pretty level golf most of the day, maybe even higher than level golf. But yeah, it's just grasping for straws at the end of the day, trying to find some problem with Wyndham Clark's game, which was in every sense of the word, pretty damn good around the greens, especially too. He got up and down at numerous times, especially on Saturday. I think he had 4 or 5 really clutch up and downs between 5 and 15 feet.
Yeah. Yeah. Where does this put him? Historically, he's got the same number of majors now as Johnny Miller, Greg Norman, Bernard Longer, Dustin Johnson, and Bryson DeChambeau. There's a lot of other names that he has more majors than too, including Freddie Couples.
That's crazy.
Where does he sit now? Because he doesn't have the regular season resume, but he's got an increasingly impressive major resume.
Well, he's won a couple of elevated events too, right? So I mean, he's got a couple big PGA Tour event wins. I mean, you can talk about how the Pebble Wind is a little bit shortened, and as they only played 3 days, that three rounds that year as a rain had to shorten that event, but he still won. And then he's got these 2 U.S. Open victories. He's got more victories than Adam Scott. He's got more victories than Justin Rose in terms of majors, which is just shocking. So I would say pretty high up there. There's not a lot of guys in the last 20 or 30 years that have won 2 U.S. Opens. It's wild to think about.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about some other Shinnecock storylines here. Missed cut. Jon Rahm, Bryson DeChambeau, they both missed the cut by a couple strokes at least. Brooks Koepka also missed the cut. Victor Hovland, Patrick Cantlay, Shane Lowry, Cam Smith, Patrick Reed. Not a good week for Live Golf. What did you see out of the missed cut crowd?
Yeah, I just, it's crazy with Bryson. He's missed all 3 major cuts now this season. I thought he would come back this tournament and kind of figure it out, but obviously this Live thing, this shit show that's in the shitstorm that's flying around with Live, how it's going to be done after the year. It's obviously a distraction for these guys because they are clearly not playing up to snuff and up to how good they are. Because John Rahm is a very good player, and so is Bryson DeChambeau, and you have a couple other guys on this live tour that are good players as well. And you have guys like Patrick Reed playing really good golf. He didn't play that good this week, but he's played pretty good overall. And he missed the cut. Actually, he missed the cut too. But you have, it's obviously a distraction for these guys, for John Rahm and Bryson DeChambeau, trying to hold the state of live and try to keep repping that brand and answering questions about it while trying to play your best golf. It's got to be challenging for these guys, but if they took the money, they need to answer for this tour, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I just feel like at this point, people's expectations are a little too high. And I think you and I are included on that one because we both thought that John Rahm was going to play well. I mean, we were talking offline and, I was even toying with the idea that Rahm could potentially be in contention to win the thing at the end. But
yeah,
Bryson to me at this point, anytime someone mentions him contending or winning in a major, I feel like it's overstated because he just hasn't played well in majors. If he doesn't make this, I think it'll be 4 for 4 if he doesn't make the cut at the next the Open Championship. So he's not there for whatever reason. His game is not there. So I guess we'll see what happens.
I really thought Bryson was going to play well at Shinnecock. He's obviously has a good track record at U.S. Opens. He's won 2 of them, obviously. And, you have Shinnecock has pretty wide fairways, 48 yards on average. So you can have that variance for hitting it offline a little bit. It didn't seem like the rough in the heather was that penal. A little bit here and there, obviously. But I thought Bryson was going to be able to kind of hit driver and hit it everywhere. That's kind of his thing. And be able to sort of manage the distance control issues with those lower clubs and be right there in contention. He obviously is really good at the moment. So I was really surprised to see him miss the cut here. I was really banking on a good week from Bryson.
Yeah. Speaking of live guys, Joaquin Niemann gets penalized. There was lots of chatter about selective enforcement, obviously club throwing. There was even some chatter online afterwards that it was a traditional golf media versus live golf media thing and how it was talked about. Did you make anything of this? I didn't think it was that big a deal, although I do think the PGA Tour and the major governing bodies should just apply one standard across all events and penalize guys if they are going to throw clubs or, slam clubs into tee markers or things like that we've seen. Because I think from a decorum standpoint, I don't care how intense the competition is, there should be some consequence if you do that.
The craziest thing to me about this whole situation is that in the year 2026, we don't have video of this. How can we just not have video of Niemann throwing a club? There's a million cameras out there. How is that? How do we have to talk to a volunteer who was on the hole who recounts what happens? How can you possibly penalize this if there's no video of it? I would think there would be some back channel video of it, but nothing has even come out on X.com. I'm surprised by it. I don't think you can judge a player about what they did without actually seeing the action. You could hear about what happened and you can get you can get stories from the volunteers on the hole. But until I see with my 2 eyes, I can't talk about it too much. I mean, there wasn't a lot of clapback from Niemann, so he must have really chucked that thing. There was reports about how he was kicking around in the sand like a toddler. So I think that was another thing. So the way I look at it, there wasn't a lot of comeback from Niemann about it. So he must have really did a lot to justify that two-stroke penalty.
Yeah, to me, I feel fine about it because I look at it through the lens of his reaction plus what it means for golf in general. I think when people see that sort of thing, and I'm talking about the everyman, the guys that are out, the weekenders who are playing at your local clubs and country clubs, when you see that behavior on TV, it triggers in the mind, especially folks who haven't been around golf for a long time. There's lots of people who haven't been around golf a long time in golf, playing golf. When they see that, it makes them think, oh, well, this is an acceptable way to react when I do something that I don't like. And that just, to me, that's the reason why the penalties are so important at that level. I mean, I know there's an argument that these guys are playing for a lot of money and there's emotions and everything else, but every major sport, think of football, think of anything else, there are penalties for basically emotionally overreacting. And To me, it's just one of those things where there should be a standard rule. There should be a standard rule applied, so there isn't gray area, and it can't be interpreted the way this instance was interpreted, where every other incident of a player dropping or throwing a club was thrown out on social media with a flag to the USGA and the powers to be in golf saying, why didn't he get penalized? Like, it's just, it's one of those things where you're if this is the road we're going down, you just embrace it. You do it.
I mean, you had Wyndham Clark, the U.S. Open champion last year, almost a captain family threw his driver at that sign at Quail Hollow last year. So, yeah, I totally agree that there needs to be a hard and fast rule. I think if you're going to talk about the PGA Tour, they have the same thing with slow play, right? How they don't give a penalty, and there's a lot of gray area there. So I kind of file it under there. There's going to be a lot of gray area until there's a rule.
Yeah. Scottie Scheffler seems to be blocked from winning. He's hanging around. We see him on the first page of the leaderboard almost every weekend he plays, especially on Sunday, but he's always just far enough. And we haven't seen him win now since, I believe, January or early February. So what do you see there? How do you see where he's fitting in, and what's the issue? What do you think? There's a particular part of his game that is the most broken right now?
To me, it's not as much granular as it is overall. I think you see a frustrated Scottie Scheffler a lot of times out there. And you saw that change a little bit this week at the U.S. Open. On 16 on Saturday, he chips in. You saw a pretty good fist bump. You don't see that a lot during play from Scottie Scheffler. He knocks that chip in, and then he makes birdie on 17, and then he misses a really short putt on 18. And that would have been big. I think that would have carried in momentum. I believe it was under 4 feet or right about 4 feet. He had a 4-footer on 18, and he missed it by a cup. He didn't even hit the hole, and almost had more coming back than he did on that putt. So, and then on Sunday, he just had it stuck in neutral. He bogeys the first hole, and then he's just kind of flailing from there, and not the usual Scottie Scheffler. So a little bit more emotion was shown at the U.S. Open, which is something I think Scottie needs to show, and that's happened a lot. Just celebrating those wins, and I think that was a lot of fun on Saturday when Scottie chips in on 16. You hear that big, huge roar from the crowd. You see the fist bump from Scottie, and you say to yourself, boy, here comes number one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it goes back to the thing that I talked about earlier with just how he up until very recently, we haven't seen much emotion at all, whether it's good or bad, what's happening to him on the golf course. But I look at the way, to me, I know you mentioned when we were talking offline a little bit about this, that, his distance control with his irons and his wedges hasn't looked as sharp as it was when he was in that stretch of just dominating week in and week out. But to me, it's the putting. And it's weird because it's not the 10 to 15 footers. It's the 2 to 5 footers ish. He just isn't automatic with those like he had been. And this feels very much like the stretch of golf that he played right before he went on that winning tear. We talked what felt like for the first 2 seasons out of bounds about how he just couldn't seem to get over the hump, and it was all because of putting. And if he figured that out, if he just figured out how to be basically a slightly better than mediocre putter, man, everything would be so different. And I think we're right back there now. If he's making those 2 to 4 footers that he missed this past weekend, he probably wins.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the week where the putter gets hot for Scottie Scheffler and he blitzes the field and win by 8, because it's gonna happen. That's why you look at the odds boards, and this is a little peek into the Travelers, but every week he's around 3, 4, 5 to 1, and so one of these weeks he's just gonna come out and blitz the field. It's just gonna happen, I think. And I've been waiting for it to happen all year, and it hasn't happened yet. It's kind of crazy to me.
Yeah. Okay. So I get a little gripe about the broadcast. You can tell me whether I'm fair or foul here. Obviously, professional golf is split for the most part between NBC and CBS. And maybe I've just gotten accustomed to the CBS broadcast in recent weeks, but this particular US Open, the broadcast felt so freaking lifeless. And I don't know if it's Shinnecock Hills, the venue. I don't know if it's the venue's fault, where it's just a very spread out property where it's hard to get crowd noise and stuff like that injected into it unless you're in certain spots on the course, or if it was actually how NBC was producing the event. But there was so much, and obviously I was watching on the Peacock app. I wasn't just watching on my local NBC affiliate, but there was so much what felt like up and down with the audio levels, from one broadcaster to the next, to someone walking along, to crowd noise coming in. going out. Like there were a couple moments where like someone made a putt, you hear the crowd, and then the crowd's like silence, like they EQ'd the crowd down. And it felt like such a disservice to the event because Wyndham Clark had a lead almost throughout the entire thing, and a multi-stroke lead at that. And there was just like, it almost felt like they were doing what they could to avoid creating television drama, because you have players that are multiple strokes down from this guy who's in cruise control. And when they do something impressive, especially on like Saturday, it just gets EQ'd down. And to me, it was weird. It felt odd. I don't know if it was a one-off thing or if that's just something I haven't noticed before on NBC broadcasts, but it really took away from what I think could have been a better finished product on TV this weekend.
Yeah, I agree with some of those too. I was watching on a local NBC affiliate, but it seemed like just Shinnecock in general, which I was really surprised about because, Shinnecock is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, U.S. Open venue. I think it's right up there with that and Pinehurst. I think it could be talked about how it needs to be at Shinnecock more. I think you can have that discussion. But wow, was it a disgrace and almost really sad for the fans? I thought, especially on Saturday. I mean, on Saturday, the final group didn't see off till 3:45 local, which is, I think, an abomination at the start. I think, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure that Shinnecock, obviously, you have to take a train to get out there, first of all, from New York City. Getting out there by car is an absolute mess. There's just so many people on the Long Island freeway, and it's just a mess. Just getting fans out there and just being so many people out there is a lot of work. And I think one of the last trains to get back to New York was before they actually finished. So then you had pictures. If you go on X and you go on the internet, you look at these pictures of the grandstands Wyndham Clark is going through, the U.S. Open winner. He's going through in the final group, and there's just not that many people there. It's shocking.
Yeah.
It's almost like a little bit of a ghost town in that sense, and that made for those muted crowd moments in those muted crowd areas. I mean, Wyndham Clark on 16, he hit the shot of the tournament on Saturday, a 275-yard 3-wood to 4 feet on 16, where he taps it in for eagle. And I don't think anyone really clapped. I don't really know if anyone really went nuts, including the booth. They didn't really do that much either. It's just this unbelievable shot. I don't know if it's the fact that these people hate Wyndham Clark or if it's the fact that there wasn't a lot of people out there, but it needs to change. And it's a little bit sad to see. I was watching and I was like, that was the best shot you can really hit. And there's just not a lot of noise. I think I made more noise in my living room watching that shot than people on the grounds at Shinnecock Hills did.
Yeah, it was really just a remarkable thing to see, just the how muted it was. We'll see what happens here moving forward. Let's get into these big schedule changes, because that is, once we get past the major here this past weekend, this is the big news. So the PGA Tour announced that it is going to be putting on roughly 23 to 24 premier events every year. It's the track 1, track 2 theory that we had been hearing. They're calling it the Championship Series and the Challenger Series. Obviously, the Championship Series is going to have bigger purses, bigger fields with cuts, traditional 36-hole cut returns. Nate, I know you're happy about that. They're calling it a big change, but I think one thing that's worth noting before we get into any more, like if you look at what the Signature Series looks like now, what the signature events are on the PGA Tour right now, for the most part, that is what the Championship Series will consist of in 2028 when this begins. But the bigger change outside of those two tracks is the fact that we're going to have players moving up and down between these two series, roughly 20 players moving between events based on how they're performing, how they're playing. Quicker relegation. Some people think that's going to be make golf really exciting, more movement, and then of course we've got the FedEx Cup and postseason changes. Match play is coming back to the postseason, but we haven't gotten any details on that yet. The Tour Championship is going to be different. We don't know to what degree, but we do know that it's going to be rotating a venue. So we're going to be seeing this not in Georgia in August when the temperature is 147 degrees Fahrenheit. We'll be seeing it in other parts of the country in larger markets, which I think is also a good thing for golf. Other than that, nothing gigantic. No more sponsors, no more sponsor exemptions for these championship series events, and that's kind of it. What do you think? What was there anything that stood out to you from the announcement?
Well, the first thing that obviously sticks out, and one thing we've been talking about all year, is these full field events. 120 about in the championship series, and 144 full in the second series. There, that's just awesome. That's more golf to watch, and that's something that I fully support. But another big thing that came out yesterday is just the fact that we're going to get a rotating cast of the Tour Championship between like Cypress Point and between some other really prestigious golf courses, and that's going to be really cool. Just to get in more notable U.S. markets, more notable U.S. courses, and rotate it around. I think the Tour Championship being 20 guys in the same place every single year was getting a little bit stale. So let's reform it a little bit. Let's play match play. Let's talk about some other ways we can do it, and just even if match play doesn't work and it falls on its head this year. Maybe Scottie Scheffler loses 7-6 to Eric Cole in the first week or something like that. I don't know if that's gonna that probably wouldn't happen, but let's try it and see what happens. And if it doesn't work, we can go away from it. Maybe TV doesn't like it if that happened, but it's really exciting to hear the PGA Tour is going to dive especially back into match play and try to change things up and try to make the product even better and better and better. So kudos to new CEO Brian Rowlett.
Yeah, something to me that stands out is a guy we just spent a lot of time talking about, Wyndham Clark. I'm not sure Wyndham Clark makes it through to the Byron Nelson where he got that his first win in almost 2 full seasons in this new system. Like, I think he would have been relegated because I just did some quick math. There were 120 weeks or 840 days between his win at Pebble Beach in 2024 and his win at the Byron Nelson in last month in 2026. I don't know if he would have necessarily played well enough. He was ranked 75th in the world coming into the Byron Nelson. So to me, this is something that could really change the complexion of golf and maybe address one of the things that people have felt is a bit unusual about how the signature event structure and what you get for winning a signature event, how that measures up against what you really deserve, a player really deserves.
Yeah. I think Wyndham Clark's a good example. I think like Patrick Kelly is a good example. I mean, he's even less than Wyndham Clark. As he's a guy that could be. I think Jordan Spieth, you can talk about him. He seems to have struggled the last few years. So I think it'll be good because they'll be talking about the relegation and these guys can get relegated down. But then a guy like Jordan Spieth can rely on sponsors exempts. Nope, those are gone. So you got to play good golf to keep your card and to keep up on that championship series. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. We've got a couple minutes left here. Let's quickly get through the Travelers Championship, do a little bit of previewing. This, of course, it's easy to pick the local guy, Mr. Keegan Bradley, who, as you pointed out before the show began, seems to be the local guy at every Northeast golf tournament that happens.
Seems like it.
But we got Scottie Scheffler leading the way. Of course, this is a signature event. Scottie Scheffler is sitting at plus 440. Next closest, we've got Tommy Fleetwood at plus 1600. Ludwig Aberg, Xander Schauffele, Matt Fitzpatrick, and Cameron Young rounding out the top 6 odds. Who do you got? Who are you looking at? Who do you think's interesting?
I'm looking at Brian Harman right around 55-1 this week. I think it's really interesting. He's played some good golf, especially at TPC River Highlands. He's at a number of top 10s and stuff too. So he's kind of looking for that win this season. It seems like Brian Harman always kind of pops up and gets a victory here. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's this week. But yeah, and also kind of just as we're talking, I think Tommy Fleetwood could be a good pick this week. He had a putt to possibly tie Keegan Bradley on 18 last year, and it seemed to mysteriously jump off line. I don't know if Keegan Bradley called the Northeast golf gods on that one, but Tommy Fleetwood is a guy who a couple weeks later got the monkey off his back, got that first PGA Tour victory. Now he's looking to start to open the floodgates. I think Tommy Fleetwood could be a good pick this week. So I'm looking at those two guys as sort of my main picks. What do you got, Josh?
I just want to make a quick little observation here because I have the book pulled up in front of me. Wyndham Clark sitting at 35-1 when he's arguably, and I know he's coming off of a major win when he's had all that grape over the last 7 days.
He's had a lot of grape. Did you
I,
see
I
him
still
Did you
feel
see him
like,
on the Dan Patrick show yesterday? He looked barely alive. Looked like he's been up
yeah,
for 48 straight hours. I think it was
I
a
mean,
Dan Patrick show.
but but still, 35-1 feels a little bit insulting, right?
Yes,
It does,
I would agree with
yeah.
that.
You know who I'm looking at? I'm looking at Sam Burns, 25-1. He was there this past week, and
Oh
his
my,
game
very
looked
much, at least
good.
there. Yes, definitely.
He hits the ball a mile, and this golf course they're playing this weekend, I think, as you said, is playing a little under 6,900 yards.
Yeah, that's a fun tidbit about this golf course. The LPGA Tour event at Hazeltine, the their version of the PGA Championship, is only 40 yards shorter. They're both around 1,600 yards. So definitely not a long golf course in that respect. So that's why another reason why I like Brian Harman.
So yeah, I'm saying give me Sam Burns at 25-1. That feels like a great value, and I feel like given how he has played up to date, that just seems like an easy pick. You know, I'm avoiding 3 of those 6 guys that I named in the top 5. I'm avoiding Ludwig, I'm avoiding Xander, and I'm avoiding Matt Fitzpatrick. None of them have looked as sharp as they did earlier in the season. Xander and Ludwig obviously have had their own trials and tribulations over the last several months as well. When it comes to long shot picks, it's interesting because, you know, if you wanted to grab one of those guys that's in the Harmon area, the 55-1 range, Keegan Bradley is right there.
Yeah.
I mean, if
Is,
we're
is
going to
Tom
talk,
Kim in the event?
like,
Did Tom Kim make the event? He played well at the U.S. Open.
that is a great question.
But for long shots, I'm looking at Eric Cole. I'm looking at a guy he's about 100-1 on the books. He's a guy that hasn't won yet on the PGA Tour. It's a matter of time. He's been in contention a numerous amount of times on the PGA Tour and then not been able to convert the win. So he just keep getting experience. So I think Eric Cole could have a good week this week at TPC River Highlands.
We have no Tom Kim, but we do
I
have
figured.
a Siwoo Kim, and we do have a Michael Kim. And
I
if
do.
we're
I
going to
also like
pick
Siwoo
long
this week.
shots, if we're going to pick long shots, I'm going to go with Michael Kim at plus 150,000 because
I
why
like
not?
it. I like it. Tom.
That's the thing. A 6,800 yard golf course on the PGA Tour, anyone can win there. Anyone can win there. Anyone in the field can win. And
That's
like
for sure.
when we talk about these other events, you know, if the average is between 72 and 7,400 yards, and then the longer ones, like a couple down in Florida that get stretched out to 76, 77, 7,800 yards, like the number of guys who can win at those places, it shrinks exponentially
Yes,
as you
does.
increase length. You know, this is one of those weeks where who knows, anybody could win.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for this episode. Be sure to follow us over on TikTok and here on YouTube if you want to see more in between episodes. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to get the latest episodes delivered to your inbox. Have a good week. And remember, whether it's down the middle or out of bounds, keep on swinging.